Good morning. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. All right. Good morning and happy Saturday, everybody. Welcome to our partner walk here at Gompers Park on the northwest side of Chicago. There are a number of quality and worthy events going on this morning, so thank you for joining ours. My name is Alder. I am a certified arborist, and I am the Tree Keepers Program Manager for Openlands. With me is tree keeper Emily Ricewig, who is the Director of Communications for Openlands, and she is filming us. We invite you to ask any questions or post any comments to the chat, and we have tree keeper Ruda who's keeping an eye on that. So let's get underway here. I want to take a quick minute to talk about Openlands, which is a nonprofit organization based here in Chicago that was founded in 1963 with the idea that urban areas should have open space for people as well. We realize how important green spaces are to people's mental and physical health, and that is something we work on throughout the region. Since we only have an hour here, I want to focus on the trees, but I invite you to go to openlands.org to check out all the different aspects of Openlands work, including advocacy, water trails, including the new African American Heritage Trail that goes through the south side of Chicago, and also with Birds in My Neighborhood and building school gardens. So let's get back to the trees here. I've decided to start here because we have a classic American elm behind us that is possibly 100 years old. And while we did lose most of the American elms because of Dutch elm disease over the past handful of decades, we do have some survivors around town. You'll find some in Grant Park in downtown Chicago, and we have a beautiful, beautiful one here with the classic vase shape here in Gompers Park. We think it survived because it was away from the other American elms that were on the street trees. So this is a native species that we used to find throughout the eastern part of the United States, and I encourage you to find them and enjoy the ones we have here. And we're going to turn around, and we've got another great native hardy tree here. Here we have a hackberry, and if we come on down here, this is a tree you will find on parkways and parks throughout the region. It is a hardy tree. It has what we call opposite leaf arrangement, which I will try to find a good example of here. So when we do basic tree ID, one of the first things we talk about is whether or not the leaves or branches have opposite or alternate leaf arrangements. And as you can see here, the leaves are staggered and as opposed to directly across from each other. So we refer to this as alternate leaf arrangements. And another way to identify a hackberry in particular is this asymmetric leaf base you see here, how one side is farther down than the other. And this leaf actually kind of sort of looks like an elm. In fact, this was in the elm family up until recently, and they reclassified it. It also has kind of a sort of a vase shape. I almost think it looks almost more like a goblet. And another distinguishing feature of hackberries, we have several of them right here, it has, in its youth in particular, it's got these kind of warty ridges to the bark, which if you pan up, you should be able to see. It loses a little bit of that in its maturity. But we've got three nice looking hackberries here that have been here a while. These are tough urban trees. They handle the salt, they handle the pollution, and that's why they are planted in parkways and in parks throughout the region, not just Chicago, the suburban communities too. Now we're going to go check out a couple other native species. We're coming up on a hawthorn here, but we've got better examples of those. You'll find hawthorns in parks, virtually every park in Chicago. Coming up here, we have a honey locust, another very, very common street tree. In fact, I would consider it overplanted. We actually don't plant these. Whereas that hackberry was a simple leaf, meaning it had one leaflet, if you will. This is actually a compound leaf with a number of leaflets coming from a single node here. So you'll notice it's got a rachii here and then a number of leaflets. Each of these little things is a leaflet, not a leaf, whereas this whole thing, that is one leaf there. And people really like these trees. Number one, they're very tough. They handle the salt, they handle the pollution. And it also has kind of nice filtered shade that comes through here with a broad spreading crown. So they're very popular, but a bit overplanted. This is a honey locust, which is Gleditsia triacanthos in the Latin. Most of the street trees that you see are actually a variety called inermis, meaning unarmed. The native hackberry has some mean thorns on it, and they found a variety that doesn't have thorns. So what you see on parkways is a thornless variety. Now, sometimes those thornless varieties will wind up showing thorns, and usually that's a sign the tree is under stress, perhaps the soil or some other thing. And so even though what was planted was the enormous variety, sometimes you'll see some thorns on that. Over here to my right is another common street tree. This is a silver maple. These were planted after we lost many of the American elms decades ago. Hello. And silver maples, they grow fast. They were good, tough urban trees. However, we planted a lot of them back then. And they're reaching maturity. They grow fast and they don't particularly live very long. Growing fast means their wood isn't particularly strong, and they tend to lose limbs in storm damage when storms come through. So these are actually banned as parkway trees. Now, a neighbor had one of these growing in his yard and decided to plant it here in the park where it has tons of room to grow up and grow tall. Silver maples out in the wild can reach 100+ feet and easily 60-foot spread. And to me, at least in terms of deciduous trees, it has the most fractal shape, self-similarity if you look at the branches and the smaller branches. So they're really cool. And another cool thing about maples, if we're thinking about basic tree ID, is that we saw the opposite leaf arrangement. Join us if you want. We're doing a tree walk here. So I grew this from a seed in my apartment. If you want to tell us. We have a, okay.
I have pictures of this tree for every year for the last 30 years.
So we have we talked about doing partner walks, and we have ran into the person who grew the silver maple we are looking at right now. Hi, can you tell us your name?
Yes, my name is Jerry Bacher.
Hi, Jerry. How you doing today?
Very good, very good.
So you grew the silver maple, you said from seed in your apartment or something?
Yeah, I had a pot on my deck. I was trying to grow a spruce, and it sat there for like 3 years, and my neighbor's silver maple dropped the seed into the pot, and up came this twig with one leaf. And I would bring it in the winter in my apartment, and I would take pictures of it blooming in the spring, or like it would start growing a little bit and take a little time lapse every couple days. And moved it to Chicago. This was in Oak Park originally. Moved it to Chicago. It lived in that apartment for many years, and it was getting too big. And as I brought it out of the apartment and put on the front porch one last time, and then Jim McDonald.
We're going to see him in about an hour.
Tell him that I might not remember Jerry Bacher, but David Horick is a coworker I have who planted this. It was one of the crew that was here the day it was planted. They'd taken it from my front porch, brought it over here. I know Jim pruned it a lot because it had originally had 4 big branches, and he pared it down to really just the main one so that it would be more stable, because they're not a real stable tree.
Yeah.
And I've just marveled at how it grows, and I always bring my friends here on bike rides to see my tree.
Yeah. Well, that's great. We did not stage this, by the way. This is totally a coincidence. And so we are going to see tree keeper Jim McDonald later on. Speaking of tree keepers, you mentioned Dave Horak. He's a tree keeper as well. We have just opened up registration for the Fall Tree Keepers course, and you can find out more information about that on our website. That's openlands.org. So one cool thing about maples, we saw the hackberry, which has alternate leaf arrangement. Let me get my microphone clipped back on here. And if we zoom in here, we can see how these maple leaves are directly across from each other. So this is what we refer to as opposite leaf arrangement. Again, these are basic things you can use for to start to identify trees. So they're directly across from each other. So we refer to this as opposite leaf arrangement. There's only about a handful of different trees that have opposite leaf arrangement. So if you can see that, you can really narrow down what kind of tree it is. There's a nice acronym for remembering that, which is MAD, Buck, Horse, or something like that. Maple ash dogwood, MAD is maple ash dogwood, with like the maple we've got here. And then buck horse, or whatever variety of that you want to call it, it refers to buckeye and horse chestnut, which are related to each other. And those are really the 5 main trees with opposite leaf arrangement. The rest of them have alternate, like we saw with the hackberry and the honey locust here. You'll notice these dark spots on this leaf here. That's really kind of a nasty looking thing that maples suffer from, in particular silver and Norway maples. This is really benign fungal problem called tar spot. So if you see that and think, oh my gosh, somebody should do something, nah, it's really a function of the wet springs we've had in the past couple of years. You'll see a lot of tar spot on Norway and silver maples in particular. And we have a lot of Norways and silver maples on our parkways, so you'll see it quite a bit from that. Nothing to worry about. If anything, if you wanted to do anything, just rake up the leaves each fall to try to get rid of that fungal matter. Anyway, we are gonna keep walking because this hour is gonna fill up fast. I will tell Tree Keeper Jim, and we're gonna see Tree Keeper Julie Neufeld later on too. So we'll say hi. This is fantastic. Tell you what, I'm Al Daru. I'm the Tree Keepers Program Manager. Send me an email at treekeepers@openlands.org. I would love to see the pictures of this over the years.
Yeah,
so.
I just took some out. I'll send them to you.
That's fantastic. We actually did a bike ride here a couple of years ago, so maybe you'll have to join us for another one. So that'd be great. Treekeepers@openlands.org. Have a great Saturday. And I mentioned another tree with opposite leaf arrangement, which is ash. We've actually lost most of our ash trees due to emerald ash borer in the past handful of years. And this is a pretty nice looking ash tree here. I was happy to find this. And you can see again, so this is one leaf with the opposite leaf arrangement, and this is a compound leaf, what we would refer to as pinnately compound. So that there, for all you young hockey players out there, that is one single leaf there, each of these being a leaflet. So nice looking ash here. We don't have too many of these left, and there are neighbor organizations out there who are raising money to treat the ash trees that they have, which is cool. And tell you what, let's head this way. We've got so many more trees in this park. I was not able to get together the list and map of these trees, but I will do that in the coming week and share that out with all of you, so you can come here on your own and see these trees. The list I'm going to put together and map is going to have a lot more trees than we're going to cover today, so it's really worth getting outside, and really it's worth getting outside all the time. Tell you what, let's go check out some understory species here. These are a pretty awesome specimen. This is something we do plant quite a bit. These don't get especially tall, so they're good for under power lines and that sort of thing, where you have a limit to the height you want. This is serviceberry, and it has also called a Juneberry, called the Juneberry because that's when the fruit ripens, and birds love these. So if you want to get some serviceberries, they're totally edible. You got to get to them before the birds do. And so if you can see the margin of the leaf here, which is around the outer edge here, you can kind of see it's a little bit toothed. And that is another thing you can use to kind of identify and describe trees, is how is that margin? When we refer to the margin, we mean the outer part here. So this is a serviceberry, has edible, like I said, real dark fruits in June, hence the alternate name Juneberry. It has beautiful fall color, and then in winter, it's got kind of interesting bark with these kind of vertical stripes you can see to it. We had a landscape architect on a tree walk we did a few months ago who described this as having 4 seasons of interest. So beautiful native species that we plant, and you can see a little grove of them here. So often multi-stemmed, although sometimes they're single stemmed as well. So again,
Al,
yes.
Someone asked if there's any organized harvesting of trees in Chicago.
Is there organized harvesting of trees in Chicago, meaning the fruit or the trees itself? The only harvesting of serviceberry that I know is done on the Bloomingdale Trail, aka the 606, where they do collect the Juneberries there and make like Italian ice out of them and stuff. But I don't know of any other harvesting of tree fruits in the region. That's a good question. And again, people, if you do have questions or comments, put those in the chat, and we've got Tree Keeper Ruta keeping an eye on them. And some of those questions will come to me, and then we'll share out the answer to that. So as opposed to a lecture, I would love to have any sort of discussion. I'll tell you what, we've got another really cool shrub behind us, so let's check this out. This is actually witch hazel. I was camping in Michigan on the on the eastern shores of Lake Michigan, and there were all sorts of witch hazel here. And you see a little bit of that asymmetric base to this leaf, and it's a kind of a wavy margin as opposed to the slightly toothed margin of the serviceberry we saw there. This is a little bit more of a wavy margin, wavy witch hazel. That's how I remember it anyway. And you can see the opposite branching structure of the leaves here too. So another understory species. Find them, there's actually associated with black oak in sandy areas along beaches, such as western Michigan and northern Indiana along the lake as well. So we've got a number of these here, and tell you what, let's head over the bridge here.
Sorry, I was going to ask if it's stressed. Is it stressed?
It might be a little bit stressed. This one in particular, the other ones behind it look a little better, but yeah, this one does look a little bit stressed. Maybe it's just the drought.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that's probably just drought. The other ones don't look too bad. I'll tell you what, we're going to cross over the bridge here. On my left as we go, you'll see some more witch hazel and serviceberry. And we have so many more trees to get to. And so, oh, you know what?
Someone asked, does anyone water the trees in the park?
I don't know of anybody who actively waters the trees in the park. And tell you what, we might have a special little surprise here. When I came out, oh, no, it's out here. Sometimes if you come here, there's a turtle who hangs out here. And I saw him earlier. And while a turtle is not a tree, it's pretty cool. It's good to see wildlife and nature. That's one of the benefits of trees that we haven't really talked about yet. Trees provide all sorts of benefits for them. And one of them is wildlife habitat. And I'll tell you what, let's get down. We're going to go check out a 200-plus-year-old Bur Oak tree. This park in particular has many, many old oak trees. And when we walk through this park later on, we're going to get a chance to see that. And as always happens, we'll find a different executive. So over my left shoulder here, you can see this gigantic Bur Oak, estimated to be, go ahead. Estimated to be 200 to 225 years old, and there are a number of trees of this size and age in this park. Makes it worth checking out. We talk about possibly trying to establish some sort of heritage tree program to highlight these amazing old trees that we have. And so we're right here next to the lagoon south of Foster. There's another part of Gompers Park that's actually north of Foster, and perhaps we'll do another tree walk here someday and check out those trees. You can kind of see the real thick ridges of this Bur Oak, and the reason that is one way it helps survive fire. Bur Oak is a foundational species in prairies, and fire is a part of the natural cycle in prairies. So the thick ridges of this bark helps this survive fires. Bur Oaks can live to be hundreds and hundreds of years old, even 400, 600 years. This one here, like I said, it's 200 plus years. Real nice find here. And you know what? If you can make out the leaves there, and I'll see if there we go. That looks actually more like white oak. Let's see if I can find a better leaf. So Bur Oak leaves can get really big. Bur Oak in the Latin is quercus for oak. It's where we get the word cork too. Macrocarpa, macro meaning big, of course. A Bur Oak leaf can get pretty big. Another real character feature here are these deep sinuses here. So it's got this full top part here, and then these real deep sinuses is what we would refer to the space between the lobes, if you will, right where my forefinger and thumb are there. That's a real easy way to identify a Bur Oak leaf. Another thing is that this is a member of the white oak group, which has rounded tips to the lobes here. And members of the red oak group, in contrast, have pointy tips, which we will see later on. There's some newly planted trees, species over here we want to go check out. These are pawpaw, which are extremely common and prized in Indiana and Michigan. They sometimes are referred to as, the fruit is referred to as the Indiana banana, totally edible and rather luscious fruit. We normally think of this as a species seen a little more to the south of here, but with climate change, we are starting to plant trees we would normally associate with areas to the south here. And so this is Pawpaw here. They're fenced off to protect them, but we've got 1, 2, and you'll see these on occasion, and we're starting to plant a few more of these. One thing, the reason there's 2 of them here is you need 2 Pawpaw if you're going to get them to actually produce fruit. So great to see here, and actually thank you to tree keeper Jim McDonald for telling me these were here, because I did not see these when I scouted this park earlier this week. So tell you what, let's head on back down the trail. And we've got a couple of nice old trees. This is actually a sugar maple next up. You can kind of see the broken plates of the bark if we pan up a little bit. You don't see a whole lot of sugar maple, whereas we have an overabundance of silver maple and Norway maple. This is actually sugar maple. And yes, that's where we get maple syrup from. And I think it's actually easiest to differentiate a lot of maples by the bark, and you can kind of see the broken plates here, which is a little more classic bark of sugar maple. All right. Next up on my left, this giant tree, also with thick ridges, is Cottonwood, which is like the Bur Oak, one of the absolute most massive trees of the eastern forest. Again, with the thick ridges, and if you pan up a little bit, you might be able to see kind of a sort of a triangular outline to the shape, which gives it the Latin name Quercus, deltoides, delta for triangle. These can easily clear 100 to 120 feet in height out in the wild. They don't necessarily live all that long, and you typically find cottonwoods along waterways, and we're just across the walkway from the lagoon here, so kind of a classic spot to find cottonwood. There's a number of beautiful cottonwoods in Humboldt Park, and really you'll probably find them in any park that have lagoons or other water features. And you'll find them along the lakefront all throughout the region as well. So you look at these just thick ridges on that. And while you're doing that, I am going to get a cottonwood leaf here. And if you can see the outline there, that real kind of classic, kind of sort of triangular shape of the toothed margin here. So a classic cottonwood shape there. And like I said, native, one of the massive trees in the eastern forest. They do have a different variety of this out west, which you find all along waterways, even in Arizona, California, and the like. And let's see, what should we do next? Tell you what, let's, we don't have a whole lot of evergreens in Chicago, but we happen to have a stand of Austrian pine behind us here, which I think is kind of cool. And these kind of fell out of fashion. Maybe about 10 to 20 years ago, people really stopped planting these. So it's kind of cool to have a stand of these. So not native, but these are Austrian pines. Were planted quite a bit up until about 20 years ago. And so, like I said, it's kind of cool to have a little stand of these. The needles on these are really sharp to the touch, as opposed to a white pine, which have very soft needles. One of the easy way to tell pines apart is the number of needles in each fascicle, but I can't actually reach any of those, so you'll just have to take my word on that. And I'll tell you what, we've got some other native trees I want to get around to, so let's.
Redwoods on the west side.
Dawn redwood, you actually will find dawn redwood here and there. It's not native. It's actually very similar looking, although it's not related to bald cypress. There is actually a dawn redwood in my neighborhood. And dawn redwood, should you not know it, is an example, like bald cypress, of a deciduous conifer. Conifer really just means cone bearing. So we normally think of deciduous trees like the cottonwood and the oaks that lose their leaves every year. There are a few cone bearing trees that lose their leaves every year as well. Dawn redwood, bald cypress, and larches are the best examples of. Behind us here are some river birches. Again, kind of classic lowland wet species. And these are really cool year round because of the distinctive bark that can give a landscape a little bit of aesthetic appeal. And So yeah, river standard river birch here. There's quite a number of these in this park. Oh, and you know what? We got a red oak right here. Yeah, we mentioned, so this is red oak. I mentioned a little bit ago how the red oak group has pointy lobes to the tips. You can see right there. And so this is actually red oak, the species. There are a number of other members of the red oak species, red oak group, such as pin oak, which you really don't see in this part of town because it doesn't handle the clay soils, and black oak, which is strongly associated with sandy soils. So you'll see a lot more of those in the southeast part of Chicago near the lake, and they're all over northwest Indiana and the western part of Michigan along the shores of Lake Michigan. And so actually one way to identify trees is by your location. And so if you see a tree similar looking to this and you're in sandy soils, it's real good odds it's gonna be black oak. One way to tell, yeah, we'll kind of scoot up on this. Let me keep my distance from you here. Another way to tell red oak are these kind of classic flattened ridge tops here. We usually in casual language refer to these as ski slopes. So if you see these kind of flattened ridges here, real classic ID for red oak. And we're gonna let this nice family go by us here, and let's see what we can check out while we're at it. Let's go check out this other oak we have behind us here. Ah. So this is another member of the white oak family. You can tell by the rounded tips to the lobes. This is swamp white oak, which by the name you can guess, it does well in wet conditions. Just the other side of the swamp white is a cool lagoon here. This is worth checking out. I've seen some awesome birds hanging out here, some herons sometimes. So if you do come to Gompers, worth checking out the area. We do plant quite a bit of these as open lands. We plant a lot of trees. We planted over 1,000 trees last year through something called our Tree Planters Grant, and you can find more information about that online. Perhaps you even want to apply for a Tree Planters Grant to get trees for your neighborhood as well. And we are accepting applications for the spring 2021 planting season. Now in the Latin, swamp white oak is known as Quercus bicolor, and bicolor, two colors. That's a reference to the strong color contrast between the dark upper surface and the much paler lower surface, which gives it the Latin name. Another real key ID for swamp white, we can't quite see it now. If you can get underneath there a little bit, you can kind of see the peeling bark underneath the branches. On the other side of branches, let's see if we can, these might be a little too young to show that, but if you get up under something like this, if you're not sure it's a swamp white, the peeling bark on the underside of branches is a real nice giveaway for swamp white, as is a long stem on the acorn. And so now that family has moved down a little bit, but you can actually see here, we got another swamp white, another swamp white, another swamp white, another one behind it. It is great to see this many young oaks that can grow and mature and live here a long time to replace the mature. Hello. How's it going? Are we getting to be noon? That is tree keeper Julie Neufeld, folks. Okay, great. Cool, we'll see you up there. So I mentioned that this is a partner walk here, and that is tree keeper Julie Neufeld, who we are going to talk to in about a half an hour. You can check out that cool tree keeper shirt she's got on there. She has been involved in stewardship here for many years, and so we're going to have a chance to talk to her later on. And I know Julie from many years before I took this job. We actually did quite a bit of volunteering work here, anything from picking up trash to pruning trees. And so that is something tree keepers do throughout the region, is adopt parks and take care of them. And so let's cruise on down the walkway here and see what we've got. You know what? Yeah, we'll cover some ground here. It's like another swamp white oak, looking real nice there. Very happy, wet soil. Swamp whites do very well in parkways, which is why we like to plant them where, because parkways, by the way, parkway, different parts of the country refer to it as different things. When we say parkway, we mean the strip of land between the sidewalk and the road. So we plant a lot of swamp white oaks in parkways because oftentimes those sites don't drain and swamp white oaks are perfectly happy there. This here is a Norway maple, which the leaf looks a lot like sugar maple, but as opposed to the kind of broken platy appearance of the sugar maple bark, to me this has a little bit more like these thin ridges. And so while the leaves sometimes look very similar, the bark is very distinctive. Often people think, oh, you need to know everything about leaves to tell trees apart. But to me, it's the bark here, these kind of thin ridges. Another real identifying characteristic of Norway maple, it is just really prone to girdling roots, which is these roots that are kind of encircling the trunk. And that's just kind of a genetic thing. Sometimes it's the container it was grown in. So if you're not sure if you've got a sugar maple or Norway maple in your hands, look down. If you see some girdling roots, real possible, real likely you've got a Norway maple. And to be honest, most of the trees that you're going to see on parkways are Norways and silvers. So again, knowing your site can also help you identify that. So we've got a couple of Norways here. They were planted en masse after we lost a lot of our American elms to Dutch elm disease. And oh, you know what? Gosh, look at those girdling roots there. Real kind of characteristic of Norway maples. Ever since we planted lots and lots of Norway maples years and years ago, we've kind of found out that they don't necessarily live all that long. They also generate a ton of shade because very dense branching and just a massive amount of leaf surface area. So it's really hard to grow things underneath a Norway maple just because it has so much shade. Yeah, as a matter of fact, at least in my neighborhood, about a mile and a half south of here, most of the tree damage that I saw was Norway maples. One of the reasons is because there are just so many Norways out there, and they're just reaching maturity. They're kind of in old age, if you will, and they're a little bit prone to storm damage. There's a really cool variety called the Crimson King, which has this like deep purple leaf. And while we certainly do not recommend, go ahead. We don't recommend planting these because they are overplanted. I still appreciate the Crimson King Norway maples, a deep, real purple leaf to it. And I'll tell you what, we'll walk up or around them and check out some other stuff. There are people out enjoying the park, and that is a wonderful thing. And hopefully you all will get outside and enjoy nature as well this weekend. Let's see here. Actually, we've got another member of the maple family here. This looks like red maple, as opposed to that 5 lobes that we saw on the Norway. Red maple is a little bit more classically 3-lobed, if you can see there. And if you're looking at that color and say, you know, Al, I don't know if that tree is looking all that healthy, and you'd be right. It's suffering from something we refer to as chlorosis, which is just a nutrient deficiency. Very typical of red maple. They don't do very well in the clay soils that dominate here in the northwest side of Chicago. So we don't really plant these. And yeah, so that yellowing in the leaf is the tree telling us something. There is a very common hybrid maple that is a cross between red maple and silver maple. I believe we're going to see an example of that later on. It's called a Freeman Maple. You might know it by the trademark cultivar name Autumn Blaze, which, as you can guess, it has very cool fall color, but it's really kind of overplanted, and so we kind of recommend some other things for fall color. We're going to catch up on some good native species here that the Park District has obviously planted recently. We plant these as well. We're coming up on a catalpa here. For those of you who know Logan Boulevard, there are lots and lots of catalpas up and down Logan Boulevard. And this is a very tough native species, a huge leaf, kind of heart-shaped leaf. So this is Catalpa Speciosa. And these things are so vigorous. Look at, yeah, that is one gargantuan leaf there. Sometimes also known as the cigar tree because the fruit is this real long, almost like green bean kind of like pod. Now these things are so vigorous, they need pruning when they're young. We do not prune trees right after we plant them. but about 3 to 4 years after planting, we come and give them what we call kind of young structural pruning to get them to grow up, to alleviate any crossing branches and get rid of any lower branches. And catalpas are so vigorous that they really, really need that. That structural pruning is a strong suit that tree keepers do. The structural pruning you can give young trees can save big, expensive pruning later on in life. So it's an amazing return on the investment. A small amount of time pruning a young tree can save big, expensive, massively involved pruning down the road. So taking care of our existing trees, especially our young trees, is just as important as planting new ones. So is there a question or a comment there, Emily? Leaves are the size of dinner plates. My dinner plates are a little bigger than that, but and another thing about catalpa, we talked about opposite versus alternate leaf arrangement. And if we can, oh, you know what? We could see it. Not the first two here, but we've got 3 leaves basically coming out of one node right here. If you can see that, boom, boom, boom. This is what we refer to as whorled. If you can kind of see that, right, the second set here, 1, 2, 3. So we got 3 leaves coming out of one spot we refer to as whorled, and this is really about the only species we know of with that characteristic. And for those of you who are in the current summer tree keepers class, you might want to remember that catalpas are whorled in their leaf arrangement. Wink, wink. Let's step on over to this next tree to my left here. Really awesome.
I did have a question earlier about what you do for chlorosis.
You know, you can I start mulching it. It's the soil. Yeah. So what do we do to treat chlorosis if we see that? Well, number one, you might want to get your soil tested. And if the tree doesn't have mulch, you won't probably want to start regularly mulching that too. And you can kind of slowly nurse the soil back to health. And checking your soil is important too, because the nutrients may be in the soil and it may be a pH situation where the tree is simply not able to uptake the nutrients. So sometimes it's not that the nutrients aren't in the soil, maybe they're there, it's just a question of the soil pH that's preventing the tree from uptaking it. They say about 80% of tree problems start in the soils. Soils for trees is destiny. And so it's easy to kind of overlook it, but soils are really important. And we have another native tree here that we plant quite a bit. Very, very tough tree. It'll take the salt, it'll take the pollution. This is a Kentucky coffee tree, Gymnocladus dioecious in the Latin, which the dioecious at the end of it refers to a separate male, female, big die for 2. So separate male and female plants. These get pods on them. They are a legume. Like honey locusts get pods, but only the females will get pods. So real distinctive bark on this too. It's a little hard to tell here because it's so young. Oftentimes the real characteristic features of bark aren't evident and when it's super young. I've heard this referred to as like bacon strip bark, but it's kind of these broken plates to it. And sometimes say this is the largest leaf of a tree around. That is a single leaf there. So bipinnately compound in this case. And then we've got the rachii here and then a bunch of leaflets. So that whole thing there is one leaf. So great tree, Kentucky coffee tree, super hardy, and something we at Openlands do plant a fair amount of. And let's go check out, we are doing perfectly good on time. Let's go check out, we don't see a whole ton of these. This is kind of a lowland species. And again, since we are right by the lagoon here, it's kind of what you'd expect. There are a bunch of people enjoying the time in the park. That is just awesome to see. These are alders. Let's get up close to these little like pine cones here. They're not actually pine cones, of course. You know what? This branch here is pretty much broken off. So this kind of distinctive woody little kind of like cones to them is the fruit. So that's a real easy way to identify alder. It does have a simple leaf with a sort of wavy margin to it, but really these are kind of the giveaway for alders. And looks like the camera is having fun at the moment, so I will just continue talking about alders. There is a European alder which is a little bit invasive. And you'll find these all along river banks and waterways. And of course, here we are right by the lagoon here in Gompers Park, where we have a number of alders that I believe were planted, but cool to see, real distinctive. And what do we want to check out from here? Oh, we got a whole grouping of alders.
11:45.
11:45. Tell you what, let us.
Is a multi-trunk typical for an alder?
Yeah, I would say so. A great question was asked. Are alders typically multi-trunk as we see here? And I will say yes to that. I'm trying to think if there was one more tree we wanted to check out over here. Oh, you know what? Let's go check out this hawthorn over here. And then we're just going to take, I'm just going to stop talking because I've done plenty of that already this morning. And we're just going to take a slow walk through the kind of wooded upland sites of this park just to appreciate the totality of the trees here, not necessarily any individual species. We're coming up on a hawthorn. Jensen, the famous landscape architect, really loved his hawthorns. They attract wildlife, which we said our birds love the fruit. And so when we think about trees, we think about how important they are to wildlife as well. And this real dark glossy, there are lots of different types of hawthorns, more than I even possibly know. But one that's easy to remember is this is a cockspur hawthorn, a little bit of almost even a teardrop type shape, and the leaf, it's the width of the leaf comes almost to the petiole there. So real dark glossy kind of teardrop shape, and can get some real nasty thorns on this. I remember talking to somebody in a so some real intense thorns. I believe they were moving away from planting the straight species and trying to find some thornless ones. And I know a suburban park district professional was telling me they stopped planting these because people were complaining about the thorns, and you know what, I can't blame them. But kind of a cool, and you will find hawthorns in virtually every park in Chicago. And I'll tell you what, with that, why don't we just kind of take a little slow walk up the hill through the woods here. Maybe we'll see another tree too, because we always do. And just going to enjoy the beautiful outdoor space here. Even in the dead of winter, I will just come up here and walk around. One of the reasons I love this park, it's close to home. We talked about all the old oak trees that are here. Going up north and west from here, as I mentioned, across Foster to the north, as another whole half of Gompers Park, lots of new trees planted there in the last couple of years because they lost something like 50 or 60 ash trees here over the years. So it's good to see the replanting. We want to regenerate that forest for the future. And if you keep going west-northwest, you'll wind up in Lagoon Woods, which abuts Gompers Park, which is, if you check out the history of Lagoon Woods, it is the birthplace of the Cook County Forest Reserves, which the Cook County Forest Reserves is 70,000 acres here of awesome outdoors for you to get out into. And that all got started here in Lagoon Woods, just about a mile northwest of where we are now. And so here we can actually get down to that Austrian pine. Austrian pine has 2 needles per fascicle. If we can get up close to that, get in there. So 2 needles per fascicle for this Austrian pine here. So spruces and firs only have one needle, and pines typically have 2. Almost all pines have, sorry, I misspoke. Almost all pines have more than 1. In this case, it's got 2. White pine has 5 needles, and also these are real kind of pointy as well. You don't really see a whole lot of new Austrian pines, but it's cool to see the ones we have here. And like I said, we're gonna make a slow crawl to the other side of this park and catch up with tree keepers Julie Neufeld and Jim McDonald. Julie Neufeld has been working the garden at her bungalow, which is a couple of blocks from here, and we don't really have time to go see the garden itself, but her garden just won an award from the Chicago Bungalow Association, so she's going to tell us about that. And Julie and Jim, for years and years, were involved in stewardship in here, and so they're going to tell us a little more about the history of the park. So just check out, I'm just going to stop talking for a minute, Mike. How cool is this? A whole bunch of old oak trees. Yeah, not a bad place to spend a summer day or a spring or a fall or a winter day for that matter. Matter of fact, a couple of years ago, I was walking through here right at dusk, and a raccoon came walking down one of these trees that we are right next to, and it got about halfway down and looked at me as I was walking along and was like, "What are you doing here? Like, what are you doing here?" And it kind of went back up the tree, and I just kept on walking. So it's kind of cruise on through here. A whole bunch of different oaks, just beautiful to see. And most people think Chicago when they don't think of beautiful outdoor spaces and stands of old oak trees, but here we are. This is 1.5 miles from where I live. And there's probably cool outdoor spaces near where you live too. Oh, you know what? We should go, there's a really cool tree over here. It always works that way. So there was a lagoon just to, in the lowland spot of the park to the north, our left. There's actually another lagoon on the upland part of the park here. And if we can, there. Maybe it's a little more this way, around these people. Oh yeah, I see it now. Actually, you know what? Since this is a common tree, we'll talk about this one. You can see this is not what you would consider to be a majestic, stately tree. It's a little bit of a weedy tree. Nonetheless, it's pretty common. This is actually box elder, Acer negundo in the Latin. So while the other maples we saw were a simple leaf, this is actually a compound leaf, sometimes referred to as ash leaf maple because it kind of sort of looks like an ash. It's compound like an ash, but this is actually a maple, so box elder here. And you may also be looking at that and saying, you know, that leaflet kind of looks like poison ivy. I sure hope it isn't because I'm holding it in my hand right now. But yeah, you see this kind of this sort of odd little lobe here. It kind of vaguely looks like poison ivy, although this is box elder. It's really strange how similar those leaflets look. And so you will see box elders. They are somewhat common, but they're kind of messy. They're not particularly, yeah. We're gonna walk around some geese that are hanging out by the lagoon here. And I am looking for, aha, there it is. We've got just enough time to sneak one more tree in before we catch up with tree keepers Julie and Jim. We're gonna see another species, a native species that has a bit of a heart-shaped leaf like we saw in the Catalpa, but this one's not nearly as big. This is actually Eastern Redbud. And yeah, let's see here. Yeah, it's all right. I could jump, but if you can see the outline there, a little bit of a heart shape to it. These are beautiful, beautiful, like magenta flowers in about mid-May. Absolutely stunning. A native species, we do plant this. You won't see these anything more than about 25, 30 feet height max. So they're good to plant if you've got a power lines or something where you don't want to plant a big oak tree or something. Another real characteristic identification is if you get up close there, you can kind of see the orange on the inside of the bark as I keep my distance from Emily here. Kind of see that orange on the inside of the bark there. And if you pan up a little bit, I think you get a good example. So if you see that on the inside of the bark, a kind of a faint orange type color. Oh yeah, there we go. Oh yeah, towards the bottom. Oh yeah. So that's a real easy way to identify Eastern Redbud as well. And that heart-shaped leaf and the beautiful, beautiful magenta flowers in May. This is a legume too, so you little mini, real small little pods on this as well. So in the same family as honey locust and other legumes that have pods. Save some for me. And I believe we are just going to make our way over to Julie and Jim, and they're going to tell us, like I said, about the history of the park. And we're going to hear Julie talk about her garden. And so if there are any other questions, feel free to get them in. We've got a little bit of time as we walk over there. And if you've got a question or a comment, Normally in person, we would want more of a discussion instead of a lecture. So if you have any experiences, good morning. Yeah. We want to hear your experiences, your stories, your questions, as Emily and I just kind of walk through these beautiful red oak, bur oak, another honey locust here. We've got some, I think some some crab apples. Oops, we want to go this way. We've got some more hawthorns here. These look again like some cockspur hawthorns. And
What's the oldest tree you've come across around Chicago?
you know what? That 200-plus-year-old Bur Oak is one of them. We were in Washington Park, which is a beautiful park. We're going to do a tree walk at. I want to see if our turtle friend has come back yet. Nope. We found in Washington Park, which is about Garfield Boulevard and Martin Luther King Drive, about 270 acres, I think. It even has an arboretum in the northwest corner. We totally are going to do a tree walk there someday. We ran the tree keepers course there in the spring of 2018 and planted some trees, and they were looking great last time I was down there. And so we were talking about Washington. Oh, that's right. We were doing inventory training down there, and we found a bur oak that was 44-inch diameter. And so we measured trees, what we call DBH, which is diameter at breast height. And so it was 44 inches around. And that's probably in terms of diameter, that's probably the biggest tree I've seen in Chicago. And that tree was easily 200, maybe even 250 years old.
Ruta says she found a 300-year-old tree in Park.
So Ruta said she found a 300-year-old tree in Union Park? Oh, Union Cemetery. Yeah, that makes a little more sense because Union, yeah. And so, here we go. We are coming up on people I have known since before I had this job, and I'm going to hand the mic over to them, and they are going to talk. And so let me put my mask on here. So give us a quick minute here, everybody. We've got some old friends of mine who I've known from doing stewardship here. You can tell by their cool badges. We have tree keeper Julie Neufeld here on my left, and longtime tree keeper Jim McDonald on the right. And so, so that is turned on. If you just kind of maybe clip it, or even just yeah. And why don't you go ahead and just speak into it, and let's see if we can hear. So tree keeper Jim McDonald here was involved in stewardship here at the park for many years, and Julie afterwards used to organize volunteer work days here for many years. A lot of tree keepers here and other volunteers and students who would come here on a regular basis to take care of the trees, pick up trash, just otherwise take care of it. So Jim, are you ready to tell us about the history of the park? Tree keeper number 577. We recently certified tree keeper 1620. So tree keeper 577. Go ahead and take it away, Jim.
Hey, well, thanks for coming. I'm glad you decided to come, and welcome to Gompers Park.
I love Gompers Park.
You know, I'm going to take this off.
Sure.
If you don't mind. Thank you. Gompers is really a centerpiece for our neighborhood, and the lagoon was established really by the WPA and CCC back in the late 30s. 35, 36, when they did several of the plantings, which are still here. Some of those hawthorns that are dying that you saw were planted by them. And we do have a couple of signature oaks.
Yes.
You probably saw one of the big ones, and this one down the way. Have you seen the?
Yeah,
have
we
you
should.
seen that one?
Should we walk down to this one here? We've got
Sure.
we've got another 200-year-old oak tree. We're going to walk down, and actually, if you pan just to the right as we're walking, Emily, we'll see some prunus, some cherry trees. I believe
and
cherry
the
plum on the.
amalanchers here.
Yeah, and we saw some service berries earlier. We got another grouping of service berry here, and so these are beautiful cherry trees. Unfortunately, they're suffering from something called black knot, which is a fungal problem we're starting to see more of in recent years. So unfortunately, these are suffering a little bit from that disease you can see, but otherwise it's beautiful. Yeah, go ahead. We can go.
It seems to be spreading down
Yeah.
from this one down. The last
Yeah.
tree doesn't have it
Ah.
as markedly
So
as
it's
the
a reminder to
others.
me that I'm going to call this in, since these are Parkway trees. They are care of Bureau of Forestry, and I want to email or send them an email to let them know so that we can come take care of this, prune all of this out, and then sanitize those stools to help stop the spread of that black knot fungus that's affecting cherry trees throughout the region. So if you just check out the sheer size of this 200 plus old, Jim, do you want to tell us a little more about this tree and the park itself?
Well, this one was here long before this was Gompers Park, actually probably before there was a Chicago. So it may even have been one of the marker trees that they used for surveying. I'm not sure.
It might be a wit. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
But by the 1930s, with the Depression, the Works Progress Administration worked on the river, and also the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps, did plantings, and so they rehabbed what was a smaller park and did a lot of plantings. So some of the trees, the mature trees that you see here, were planted then. That American elm,
Yes.
the basswood, those were were planted then, and we had a lot of that river birch there was planted then as well.
Yeah, and we saw some river birch earlier. Actually, I think we saw two different stands of river birch. So yeah.
Well, subsequently, excavation was done in the 90s, following a impetus from the North Mayfair Improvement Association, mainly led by two of our presidents, Barbara Iverson and Debbie Bushbacher, and then working with federal and not-for-profit agencies like Openlands and Friends of the Chicago River, and we excavated the wetland and made it a permanent wetland, as you probably saw when you walked by. So we now have two bodies of water here, the fishing lagoon and the wetland. And you probably saw some of the plantings around the wetland as well.
Yep. And we saw the pawpaws that you pointed out to me. So that was kind of cool to see. We saw a lot of swamp white oak growing up around the lagoon. That was great. Anything more you would add, Jim?
Yes. Did you see the cypress?
We did not get around to seeing the bald cypress, so I guess we're gonna have to get that on the next turn, the next walk.
There are three, one at this end and two at this end. They're not really big yet, but they are. The idea was to give some resiliency to our trees in the park for the coming heat waves that we're going to have. And these are more southern oriented trees. I hope that the park district will continue to work on doing such plantings as well. Though both the pawpaws and the cypress can take our climate here now and certainly should be able to flourish in the future. So this whole park really is a collaboration between our community volunteers and not-for-profit organizations like Openlands and Friends of the River and federal, city, and state organizations, and of course the park district itself. So we are pretty happy to have this wonderful greenery around us and to have some vestiges of what was once here before we began to take down our urban forests. Thanks.
Wow, great. Thank you.
Laura mentioned that there's a civilian conservation corps that was
Julie, would you like to take over here?
So yeah, we're gonna switch over to treekeeper Julie Neufeld here, and so there is treekeeper Jim had mentioned the Civilian Conservation Corps and other agencies and nonprofits that helped create this park and work on this park. There is a new push that Openlands is making for a new Civilian Conservation Corps, and you can find more information about that on Openlands' website, largely spearheaded by Openlands CEO Jerry Edelman, so possibly a tremendous new initiative. And go to openlands.org to look for more information on that. Very exciting new possibilities, having a new Civilian Conservation Corps, thinking about not only the environmental benefits of that, but the occupational, like in economic potential there too. So I'm going to turn it over. Go ahead. And I'm going to say thank you, Jim, as well. So
Me too. Thanks, Jim.
and now let's hear from Julie Neufeld. So who I've known since before I even had this job. So Julie, what do you have to tell us about
I've known
today?
him since he was in diapers. No, I haven't. I'm not that old. So Al just wanted me to talk about my recent garden award, humble as I am. So the Chicago Bungalow Association is trying to maintain and preserve our Chicago bungalows. Our historic Chicago bungalows are the largest housing stock in Chicago, built after World War I to be affordable housing for families after the war. And they're throughout the city. Unfortunately, rehabbers are destroying them, but if you have a classic one like I do, you get it certified. And the association has a garden contest every year. This is the 4th year, just to promote greenery around our bungalows. When they were planted, everybody had yews in the front and hostas on the side. And eventually, most of us have ripped all that out. So my garden, I think it won its category. There were a couple hundred entrants, and I really think it won because what I've done is replaced everything I had in my formal garden with native plants. And why was I inspired? Because of the wetland in Gompers Park in 1992. Jim led a group of us on the hottest day of the year. It must have been 150 degrees to that area. The earth was like cement. We took pickaxes and shoved these little plugs in the ground. I'll never forget it. And you saw some of what we have. So I fell in love with those plants and the whole native plant movement and preserving our pollinators. So my garden is all native plants, and I think people really responded to that and voted for me, and I'm very thrilled and excited. Yay, native plants. I don't know, Al asked me to bring my iPad if anybody wants to see.
And Julie's house was just a little too far to walk to, so I had asked her if she could bring an iPad to show us photos of the garden, which I thought would be kind of cool.
Okay, so just some butterfly weed and little swallowtail. And my garden is certified as a wildlife habitat through the National Wildlife Foundation because I provide water, food and habitat for wildlife. And, you know, it's a little, there's a eastern redbud in the back, my native tree. I had a huge magnolia that I had to cut down, and I got to replace it with a native tree. So that's my Chlorosis canadensis in the back.
We just saw eastern redbud as the last tree we saw on our walk over here, as a matter of fact.
And
so
definitely check them out in the spring in this park. That one is gorgeous.
Will you post these online or send these to Al so you can send them to everybody?
I can. If anybody wants to see, they made a video of the winning gardens. If you go to YouTube and just Google Chicago Bungalow Association 4th year garden contest, there'll be a video of my ugly mug, but of my garden too.
It looks like Rita just put up a link.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I think that might be all I have. Whoops. When the grass was green, now it's all a brown mess. But I gave my Redbud a 4-hour drink this morning. So hopefully, I think that's all my pictures. But so thank you. And thank you, Openlands. And the new CCC, that is thrilling. I didn't know. I'm very excited about that.
You can send a message to your senator to help support for it.
Okay, will do.
And I just realized we've mentioned eastern redbud, aka Chlorosis canadensis, a couple of times here. Julie has one in her yard. We walked by one. There's a couple by the lagoon here. We featured that as a species you should know in the May 2020 Tree Keepers newsletter. And if you want to get on that newsletter, go to our website and sign up for it. We're just a little bit after 12, so I think we're wrapping it up. I don't know if there are any last questions or comments. I want to say thank you one more time to Tree Keeper Jim McDonald, Tree Keeper Julie Neufeld, Tree Keeper and Director of Communications for Openlands Emily for helping make this event today. Thank you all of you for joining. Please let us know if there are any last questions or comments. We'd be happy to address them. Otherwise, visit openlands.org and so people have asked, how do we find out more about this new CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps? If you go to openlands.org /advocacy, you will find more information on our blog there. And that's pretty much all I got. So our next tree walk is slated for Friday, September 18th at 11 a.m. again. We are going to go down to Little Village and check out La Villita Park, which is a newer park. And we're going to partner with an organization and learn about the history of the park and learn a little bit about the neighborhood and learn about some more trees. And if you have an idea for a tree walk or a partner organization or people you want to work with, email us and let us know. You can always reach us at treekeepers@openlands.org. Otherwise, just check out the page and have a great Saturday. Hope to see you all again.